Good evening, YouTube. HeirofCarthage here, and yes, I'm going to have the final game of the Changeling Challenge Tournament that was hosted by our very own XMT Halo. Now, this is a tournament where you had a wheel of fate, so to speak. A wheel was turned, a faction was picked for the player who was on top of the bracket. That player could then choose a couple of factions to ban, and then at that point the wheel will spin for the other player, and you have to make do with whatever faction you get. Now, as far as competitive gameplay goes, when you're just talking about like pure competition, this is obviously meant to have some fun to it, because what you see a lot when you get into like a pure competitive mode is picks and counter picks. And in this case, it's kind of, you get a little bit of counter pick capability because you can ban factions, but beyond that, you got to deal with what you get. And I think this kind of thing is kind of fun. There are definitely sometimes players who get frustrated because they're like, well, it's just the wheel that decided it. Not necessarily. It sometimes depends on the skill. Sometimes, yes, the wheel has a lot to do with it, but that's the fun of the tournament, right? So, final game. There was a best-of-5 match between the two finalists, which was Felkon and Xiphos. Felkon, I think, rocks in the XMT clan, and then Xiphos is from ODM, which is also a fantastic clan with lots of good players. So these are two very highly skilled players, in my opinion. I've seen both of them play extremely well. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of analysis pre-battle. I have not watched the final battle, so I don't know the army picks, and I don't know the outcome. Well, I mean, I know who won the tournament, so I guess I kind of do know the outcome of the battle, but I don't know who picked what and how it plays out. So I'm going to give you a little bit of, if I was in the tournament, which I was in the first game, and I got whacked by Professor Pipes. If I was in the tournament, what would I think of this matchup? The matchup is Felkon going in as Dark Elves and Xiphos going in as Tomb Kings. Now, if I just had to put my own 2 cents on this for what it's worth, because remember, I play a lot of campaign. I am a multiplayer player to some extent, but not like a heavily invested multiplayer player. I have spent a lot of time in multiplayer, though. I've played hundreds of battles. So here's the thing. If I just had to look at this one from the outset, the Dark Elves are the better faction. Dark Elves are probably one of the best factions in the game. They've got solid magic. They've got a great choice of infantry. They have decent cavalry. They have armor-piercing missiles. They have decent artillery, or I should say versatile artillery. There's only one piece of it, really, but it's versatile. They have some monsters. They have anti-large capability. They have anti-infantry capability. And they have specialist infantry on top of it. The Dark Elves have everything you could imagine, essentially, except for healing. That's pretty much the only thing that they don't have. And there is a little bit of it in the sense that Hydras can regenerate, and Soul Stealer is present in the lore of dark magic lore, or whatever they call it. Anyway, Tomb Kings, on the other hand, have really great monsters. They have access to a lot of monsters, and they are pretty good monsters, which tend to give a lot of armor-piercing capability. Their infantry, for the most part, is crap, and their elite infantry is borderline overpriced. I think intentionally. I don't think it means that like it ruins their balance, but it's trying to balance in the fact that, hey, your infantry is going to be relatively crap, and you're going to have to make do with constructs or other support units. Now, they do have access to archers, and this is one facet of the Tomb Kings that can be, at least for me, I have massively underestimated the capabilities of an archer-heavy Tomb King build. And I would think the Dark Elves would do well to remember that. But they do have access to some chariots. They're not real heavy chariots, but they're chariots, and they also have access to these carrion, which give them a little bit of ability to disrupt missiles and, hold up key flying units. As far as their good infantry goes, they do have Tomb Guard and Tomb Guard with halberds. Tomb Guard are kind of okay. Tomb Guard with halberds are probably a little better just because their melee defense is higher at 47, and they deal some armor-piercing damage. Their melee attack, like all of their halberd units, is low. But, I mean, there's some benefits of this unit. It can usually last a little while in a fight. But otherwise, the rest of their infantry is just pure fodder. Pure fodder. I think outside of the Tomb Guard with halberds, it's fodder. Whether it's expensive fodder or fodder. That's just my opinion again. Now, from a magic standpoint, I think Tomb Kings are pretty weak. On the flip side, the Dark Elves are very strong. They have access to the lore Fire, and here, I'll just go over here and show you all just so we make sure we get them all. They have access to Shadow, Beast, Death, Fire, and Dark. they have a lot of magic. A lot of magic. And several of these lures are quite good. Shadow is very useful. Lure of Beast has a couple of uses at least. Death is a powerful lure of magic. Fire is a powerful lure of magic. And Dark can be a powerful lure of magic if used properly too. Tomb Kings, on the other hand, and I don't have extensive experience in it, their best lure of magic, in my opinion, is the Lure of Light. I think Nehekara magic is pretty weak, and it's just because some of the spells in here just aren't super impressive. I like a few of them. Nehru's Incantation here is a pretty cheap way to get a lot of physical resistance, so it can be handy occasionally. And you got the Vortex, which I don't think that is impressive. And then Uskef's Incantation, a very expensive spell, but it does do a pretty significant debuff for 40 seconds. So, I mean, it's got a couple of okay spells. It's not awful, right? It's not awful. They also have Death, which is good, but like I said, I think Lure of Light is my favorite one for them. And the reason being is you have a net of Amantok if you feel like you need to control key units. Biona's Time Warp is actually pretty dang useful. It's like a wah of light. And then you got Phos Protection, which is an extremely cheap way to basically armor up and melee defense units. And if you overcast it at 10, you get an effect area. So anyway, Lure of Light is probably my favorite one coming from the Tomb Kings, just because it's an underrated lure of magic. Most people think it exists just for the net, but there's a couple other pretty darn good spells in there. Now, again, that's just kind of the matchup I see. I would give the advantage to the Dark Elves, and I would say that the advantage goes to the Dark Elves because they have more tools at their disposal, but the Tomb Kings should not be written out. I think they have a couple of builds that could be sneaky. Like, for instance, I don't have the tournament rules pasted up right in front of me, but you could probably end up bringing a whole lot of archers or something like this. If the Dark Elves, in fact, came missile heavy, yeah, you could be in a bit of trouble, because they have skirmisher units with shields. But, I mean, theoretically, and again, I'd have to go look at the rules to make sure I get it exactly right, you could pour on a lot of missile heat like this, a lot. And remember, these skeleton archers sunder armor as well. So do the Dark Elves have some tools to deal with this? Yes, they do. But, I mean, that might be something that people don't expect. You bring a big line of fodder, you bring plenty of these archers with a couple of halberds or something to help protect it. It can get pretty nasty if it's used properly. And there's lords with the Tomb Kings who do a good job of buffing missile damage. With the Dark Elves, if I were the Tomb Kings, the things I'd watch out for, the armor-penetrating missiles from the Dark Shards or repeater crossbows, those are going to be brutal. You see a lot of Tomb Kings armies that are based on constructs, and you're just going to get brutalized by those AP missiles. Big targets, easy to hit. Anyway, let's go see what happens in the actual battle. That's just my thoughts. Like I said, I would give the advantage to the Dark Elves, obviously, in this case. Alright, here we are on the battle map. I have it paused, so there's going to be no sound for just a moment. I know that people don't typically like pause screen because there's no music, no sound, movement, or anything going on, so I'm going to make this relatively quick. Let me introduce you to the army picks. Felkon goes with the Supreme Sorceress, Lore of Fire. I'll show you the spells there in just a moment. There are 2 Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, 3 Dread Spears, and 3 Blackguard of Nagarond, and there are 2 Cold One Knights. There's a lot of things about this army that I like. I don't see a disadvantage to Blackguard against Tomb Kings, unless you get that Archer Apocalypse army that I kind of hinted at. Because otherwise these guys are going to do great against Tomb Kings, because the Tomb Kings can field a lot of monsters. These guys are specialist anti-large, and they're very good at what they do. Dread Spears may not seem like the most frightening unit on the outset, but when you think about the typical chaff infantry that comes, the Tomb Kings Dread Spears are a solid pick because they have decent melee defense, and they're all anti-large. And so this leaves the Tomb Kings in a tough situation. If they have brought monsters to deal with infantry, all the infantry they're dealing with will be a bad trade for those monsters. The Chill of Sontar brought here. This thing is an interesting bit of work. As you can see, it's got this Magic Missile Frost attack, which of course it has. It regenerates, but it has Frostbite. So its melee attack slows down units, and of course this thing is really intended as an anti-infantry tool, but it can double in an anti-large fight to be useful. Now the Supreme Sorceress, Lore of Fire, mounted on a Manticore. The Manticore, I'm assuming, is to probably give a couple of things. One, it makes this Lord mobile, so that she can get around the battle map and she can do damage to key areas as needed. It's also quite good for scouting, and there's probably not an expected huge air threat from the Tomb King, so put the Supreme Sorceress in the air and you stay safe. I think that's probably the thinking that went behind it. Now, Kindle Flame has been picked here. This makes all units have a 22% weakness to fire while the casting is going on. That's a big deal. It really helps as far as like making sure that enemies get weak to fire damage. So there's going to be Fireball, and I'm pretty sure that the Tomb Kings are weak across the board to fire damage. And when we go take a look at their units, I think we'll see that it's not the case on Carrion. Like here on the Skeleton Spearmen, nope. I'm just crazy. I was thinking they were weak across the board. Well, some of them are. That Necrotect is. So there are some units among the Tomb Kings that have that weakness to fire damage, like this Necrotech, and it's probably because he's a mummy. But in any case, that is the Dark Elf army. Let's take a look at the Tomb King army of Xiphos. Oh, Xiphos, man, I am frightened. I've played him a couple of times, and I've seen a lot of his replays. He is a great player. And I've played Felkon a couple of times and been schooled nicely. Both these players are fantastic. Let's take a look at their armies. There are 3 Tomb Guard with halberds, and I had mentioned beforehand I thought these guys would be a decent pick, and here we see them. They add a little bit of backbone to an infantry line. There are 3 Skeleton Spears, also I think a pretty logical pick. Decent melee defense for a chaff unit. And then you're going to have 3 Ushabti. These are going to be anti-infantry mainly, but their armor piercing can make them useful in a couple of scenarios. They also have decent mass for stopping heavy things. And Necrotech to support all these construct units, because you have a Scorpion, you have the 3 Ushabti, and then you have Cetra the Imperishable. And he is riding atop his Kimrian War Sphinx in all of its glory. So there are also 3 Carrion units here for the Tomb Kings, and as far as the spells go, for Cetra the Imperishable, he's got the Restless Dead, which is basically a buff that whenever he's casting, there's healing going on the battlefield for a short time. He's got this Unyielding Will, which helps, add to the defense and attack of units, and then Nehru's Incantation. I mentioned liking the spell, it's there, and then Uskef's Incantation, so Xiphos bringing the 2 spells that I thought were useful, and apparently I'm not the only one who thinks those are probably the most useful out of the lore of Nehekhara. Let's take a look at these units as they go in. So the pre-game show, I mentioned the infantry disadvantage the Tomb Kings would tend to suffer, and it is no surprise that that's apparent here. Oh, there's a Fireball coming in after that Necrotect. Yikes. Oh, he got owned by the Supreme Sorceress. Got absolutely owned. That hurts. Yowza. Whew. Yeah, he's got the Restore ability too, which is quite helpful with the different units. So he's going to swing his Carrion in here to probably try and get a hold of the Supreme Sorceress, but that's when these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows are sprung. And all of a sudden, the Carrion kind of have to go in on those. If they don't, they're just going to get shot to bits. And then when one of them lands, I think this is intelligent. Felkon's going to land the Supreme Sorceress, bring it down to the ground, let your Cold One Knights do some work here. This puts Xiphos in a very difficult situation. He'd kind of committed to this fight. He's going to pull some Carrion out now. I like that. Try and save what he can. He does have this Nehekhara Horseman that I failed to call out earlier, and the Tomb Scorpion. So all of the infantry for the Dark Elves is anti-large. It's going to be rough. Even though Ushabti are a great infantry support, they are just going to really get hurt going up against these units. Look at the Supreme Sorceress immediately diving in, and then the Chilla Sontar. This fight here in the middle is going to sour very quickly. There was a charge of Cold One Knights. Tomb Scorpions will do tremendous damage, and they can even terrorize. And it's the same thing with the Kimrian War Sphinx. Oh, we got a Burning Head here. It's nicely placed on a Tomb Guard, and it's going to hit a second Tomb Guard over here too. That spell did some valuable damage. Maybe a little bit of friendly fire right here. Yeah, a little bit, not much. That was a very well-placed spell. Very well-placed spell by Felkon. It did a lot of damage. And the Tomb Guards right now are comboing with the Cold One Knights, who are getting wrecked because there's halberds there, but equally the Ushabti are being wrecked by the halberds. The Dark Elves, the Nehekhara Horsemen pouring in back here. Probably just attempting to tie down units back here. There is really not a good engagement here for the Tomb Kings. If Cetra sits back, he's just going to be harassed with repeater crossbows, or some other target will be. If they attack, there's dread spears all around and cold one knights. I mean, it's a difficult engagement. It is a difficult engagement. Here's another burning head here, and this time it's going to get a whole bunch of skeleton spearmen to the point where they just disintegrate. I think some friendly fire there too, but it takes them completely off the battlefield. Right now the balance bar is actually slightly in favor of the Tomb Kings. I just don't see it if I had to make an opinion here, and it's because although Cetra's here and he's very powerful and there's a decent bit of infantry left for the Tomb Kings, you even got this Necrotech. What are you going to do about these 3 units of Blackguard? And then on top of that, if you do wreck them, you got a regenerating Chilla Sontar and no answer to these Dark Riders at this point. The Dark Riders can inflict painful damage on these large units, and the Supreme Sorceress can't be touched. There is no way for the Tomb Kings to get to that Supreme Sorceress at this point. There's a couple of risks in bringing a missile-heavy army of Tomb Kings. Wow, another beautifully placed burning head here by Felkon. He is just burning the unlife out of these Tomb Kings right now. I love Cetra like prancing around on the Kimrian War Sphinx. Really is a cool lord. And he can cause tremendous damage if used properly. And he is being used to just kind of charge, do damage, and move on without getting bogged down. I mean, the Chill of Sontar has taken significant damage over here at the hands of all these Ushabti. The Ushabti just don't do well against blobs of cheap infantry. And so you can see they suffered tremendously at the hands of these repeater crossbows while trying to fight anti-large infantry. A lot of damage done on the Chilla Sontar, especially considering that thing heals. It's not going to be enough. The thing's going to move on to other fights, and right here the Tomb Kings are about to be surrounded. There's not going to be any escaping that very well. The Tomb Scorpion might be able to escape it because he can kind of burrow underground at times. As long as the Tomb Scorpion doesn't get left completely unprotected in the Blackguard. Look at that. Routed a Blackguard. Tomb Scorpions are good. Not to be underestimated. They're a good unit. They cause terror. Oh, that Necrotech just ate another fireball at the hands of Supreme Sorceress. That is 3 burning heads and 2 fireballs that Supreme Sorceress has been involved in. And the Necrotech is in serious trouble now. Blackguard being charged by the Kimrian War Sphinx only when it's safe. The Supreme Sorceress diving in, but was it safe? Oh, was it safe? Oh, this Manticore is going to get saved by the goony charge mechanics in Warhammer 2. I love this game. The collisions are cool, the charges are cool, but there is a goofy charge mechanic. And just look at this, you know, going up that hill. And flying units, in my opinion, and this has nothing to do with this match. This has been my opinion for a very long time. Flying units need to suffer a speed penalty when on the ground. Period. They don't, and so you end up with stuff like this where Cetra is faster and technically is caught up with this unit but is not inflicting any damage because the speed gap is so close that the charge animation won't get started and you just push the unit around. And then like this it gets free and is able to take off. So I've long been a fan of the idea that flying units really need to have their speed nerfed while on the ground and keep it while in the air. And it makes their dive bombing have to be a lot more strategic because it won't be as easy for them to get away from certain units like Cetra when they get down on the ground. Because they already have some advantages, right? Flying units have the advantage that they cannot be charged by any unit on the ground unless they're on the ground. So they get a free charge already. And I'm fine with that. Flying units need to have some advantage, right? That's the whole purpose of having a flying unit. I don't know, it's just my thoughts. A couple thoughts. And I think that's going to be a big advantage through the remainder of this battle. The Flying Lord cannot be touched, whereas Cetra is down here having to take all this stuff on. The Tomb Scorpion, in my opinion, has really done some marvelous work. Getting as many kills as it has in this kind of tough situation, it's pretty impressive. Oh, the combo here from Cetra and the Tomb Scorpion sets off some terror. And it's combined with Uskef's Incantation. It won't be enough to turn around the battle, but that is a pretty nice late game play that got rid of almost all the Dark Elf infantry there, and nearly all. Oh, Supreme Sorceress just drills it home with another fireball, and Cetra is crumbling. Apparently he is perishable in this particular match, but that was a tough matchup, in my opinion, for Xiphos. Not to take away from the credit of Felkon. I've played him. He is a fantastic player, and it makes it all that much harder. But that's the wheel tournament, folks. That's how it works. Some of you will probably begrudge this idea that the wheel does that. I think it's fun, honestly. It's just part of the challenge. It's just come see what you can do with what you get. I did hear someone say that it would have been cool if this tournament had been round robin because of the wheel, and I was like, I don't know, that's kind of a cool idea. That way you get a little more opportunities to see how the wheel potentially either gives you credit or hurts you. And I kind of like that. That's an interesting thought, to have that potentially be round robin. I may try that with Halo sometime, see if we can do some round robin matches in this format. But hey, thank you to Felkon and Xiphos. This was a best of 5 that went all the way to game 5 because both these players are fantastic. Congrats to both of them for making it to the finals, and thanks to all the players who played. And no, I'm not thanking myself. I did play in it, but I'm thanking the other players. Thanks to all the other players who played. It was a lot of fun to be able to participate in this, to get to watch some of the matches, and to see all these great players playing the game. Hopefully I'll get to participate in more, and I hope you all enjoyed the replays. So please make sure to go down there in the chat and thank Felkon and Xiphos and Halo for helping to provide us this entertainment. I really enjoyed the series. A couple of some of the players that I look up to the most in these matchups, and it was fun to see him play there. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and I will be back with more content soon. If you did enjoy this one, do me a huge favor, hit the like button. It helps other people find the content, as it helps bump this up. If you didn't like it, please always go into those comments. Tell me what I need to do better. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out. I will see you next time.